over the years between my two YouTube channels, I've actually made more videos about Bruce Springsteen than you might imagine. And welcome to another one of those. Recently I made a video addressing the fact that Bruce Springsteen is not Jewish. And it's interesting, so I'd already had that on my mind. I've been listening to Bruce Springsteen a lot. Yesterday, I'm wearing my work shirt over a Bruce Springsteen t-shirt. Driving to work, listening to Bruce Springsteen. I get to work, I see a coworker, and I said, you know what? I take you for a Bruce Springsteen fan. Am I right about that? And he and I had never talked music before, and he's a bit older than me. And he said, well, yeah, actually, I've seen him live 4 or 5 times. My brother's seen him somewhere between 40 and 50 times over the last several decades. So, yeah, I am. And it's funny because I feel like it's one of those, sometimes you can just sense something about another person if you can relate to it. Sometimes you can just sense it, and that was one of those times. So, amazingly enough, I get home yesterday. What is new on Netflix? It is Bruce Springsteen on Broadway. Now this thing's like about 2.5 hours, so I haven't watched it all yet. I've watched like the first half at this point. But somewhere in the beginning, Bruce Springsteen starts describing his parents. And he describes his father as Irish. And granted, Springsteen is Dutch. Bruce Springsteen is not Jewish. I made a video about that already. Springsteen, which is not Stein, it's not E-I, it's E-E, Springsteen, is a Dutch name. But apparently his father was mainly of Irish heritage. And I guess someone with a Dutch last name got mixed in there along the way, and that's the last name that stuck. But ultimately, he described his father of Irish descent. And then he talks about his mother. He has a whole song he sings about his mother, how much he loved his mother, and how bright and warm she was of a human being. And when he describes his mother physically, he says, my mother, she was Italian, and she had distinct ethnic features. So I want to unpack that because, and of course you know me, you've seen my mother in the videos, and I plan to shoot a couple of videos with her in the next couple of days too. And I would describe my mother the same way. My mother is also of Italian descent and has distinct ethnic features that you don't necessarily see so much in mainstream Caucasian people, especially where I live in the South. It stands out, and you can tell that. And everyone always knew that, but no one really ever asked me. But it was understood. And then when you see me standing next to my mom, like, oh wow, they look a lot alike. You don't so much see it in me, but people see it in my mother. Even though then we suddenly start looking alike once we stand next to each other. But I just want to unpack that. I want your feedback on that. This concept that a person who is perceived as white has ethnic features. And we're tracing that back to the Italian heritage. Which is interesting because we all know my mom's only registered as about 4.5% on my heritage as Italian. But you see the features and you know that she's not just Scottish. It's very obvious that that's not where her gene pool came from. So just help me understand that better. Can we accept that? Can we accept a white person saying, my mother was Italian and she had strong ethnic features? Because when we think of Caucasian people, we think of white people, especially here in America, we don't think of ethnic features on a white person. It doesn't really match. To be ethnic means that to have ethnic features means by default you don't look like the typical white person, is basically what that means, at least in American culture. And I think for anyone who watches that from outside the United States, it only serves as a reflection of how as Americans we perceive ourselves and each other. We will trace it back to a nationality and say that we're of that heritage, and we'll say my mom was Italian or my mom was half Italian, as I had always said growing up, even though the last time someone from our family tree came from Italy and crossed over the ocean was like 100 years ago. But that's the language we use, that's the understanding we use. It's part of our lingo, it's part of our culture as Americans. Bruce Springsteen did that in his video. Let's talk more about that. I think that's pretty fascinating. I think it's subtle, but I think that there's a lot there, and I think it shows it's a reflection of how we're watching these videos about DNA tests and ethnicity and all this, and ultimately we can say all day long that race is a social construct and all this stuff, and DNA tests are just arbitrary genetic markers. But we hear stories like this, and you have to kind of say, well, but there is more to it than that. It does add color and flavor and interesting things about the human experience that go beyond that. Help me unpack that. I think there's more to be said on this. Comments belong right here. I am now known as the cultural explorer. Comments right